I appreciate you being here. Please keep in mind what we are doing here on Bet On It, Shooting from the Hip, and Food for Thought. We explore human ideas, philosophies, noteworthy information. This exploration is us thinking aloud, a thought exercise, jumping into ideas and examining them and re-examining them. You will find we are prone to using adult language, expressing opinions. In keeping with that, you shouldn't believe anything we say. We are not experts of any kind. We're just having fun with these ideas, philosophies, and information in the hopes that you will find it fun and interesting. We encourage you to invest time in searching out these subjects and come to your own conclusions. Now on with the Shed Show. Welcome to Shooting from the Hip. I am your host, Beitula. Slam, what's going on, buddy?
Doing a podcast. What are you up to?
The obvious. I'm up to the obvious. So today's episode is a subject that has been a personal interest of mine since I was a kid. And then it's experienced kind of in pop culture, kind of resurgence, many thanks to Lucasfilm and the Mandalorian series. This episode of Shooting the Hip is simply titled The Way. In The Mandalorian, and I hear people often using it on social media and even in person, that this is the way. Well, I'd like to explore where the way came from, or the idea of it. And we're going to look at it in terms of that it's an Eastern philosophical concept that dominates much of Asia. So that includes Japan, China. So because of my background in karate, our focus will be more on Japanese stuff, but it's not exclusive to Japan, right? So these concepts and ideas kind of proliferated all over the world, especially as a result of like the modern world. So I would say the modern world is basically everything that happened after World War II. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, like industrial revolution.
Yeah, that all of it, and because of that, well, we truly became a global village, and so now we actually live in the global village, because there's, I'll say this only once, we have the capacity, and we are informed in terms of what goes on everywhere on the planet, and immediately there's no delay, right? So we live in this amazing time in the exchange of information. So having said that, now we're going to share some of that information with you. Now, when I first discovered this, you could only find it in books, and they were far and few between, and a lot of martial arts magazines. But I was always super intrigued by it. Now, back then, largely because I was naive and just a young child, I was fascinated by it because I thought it was mysticism, it was magic. So then when Star Wars became part of the pop culture landscape, I was like, it borrowed so heavily from like the real world that even the Jedi themselves, and this is not an episode about Star Wars, but again, trying to relate how the idea of the way is present in more commonly than most people are aware. And like I said, and then particularly today, how largely it's used in a way to sort of create these fictional realities, or this warrior-based culture that's a philosophy. They're not a species in as much as a way of approaching living, right? So having said that, we'll start with 7 eye-opening Japanese concepts that will transform your life. Okay, so these I've always been kind of enamored with. I was like, maybe this is the key to living your life, but how do you truly learn to appreciate these 7 things? So I'm going to start with the first one, and you'll forgive me if I butcher the actually pronouncing it correctly, right? So I believe it's pronounced Ikigai, and it at its root, it basically means that to discover your purpose in life. All right, so for everybody, I think it's a question, especially when you're post-puberty and you start coming into your own. And for a lot of us, there are many who don't address the question, but that's because they kind of believe that they have the answer, and the answer is typically provided by, like, family, their culture, their religion. And remember, none of that stuff you chose as an individual. You never chose any of that stuff. You're raised into it, so then you presume that to be normal, right? So, or that to be your reality, or you derive your purpose from the more broader purpose that's kind of force fed to us. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And we just expect it to be the normal.
Right. Okay. So here, in the way that I would interpret then this Ikigai, is that it's you create the purpose to your existence. So then it becomes the reason why you get up in the morning, right? It's what drives you, and you align it. How you discover what that purpose is, you align it with your personal strengths, your aptitudes, your scholastic or academic aptitudes, your passions. So that requires you to define those things, right? And then once you've taken stock of all these things, that your personal strengths, your aptitudes, and your passions, then you look at the needs of the world. What does the world require? And you find where those passions, aptitudes, and strengths, where they overlap, and that's your purpose. That becomes like the thing that you do, right? So, and ultimately, what it does is it gives your life meaning, and so in a way, it's a personal meaning that services a much larger meaning, like that now you're meaningfully contributing to the whole, but you're doing it by meaningfully investing all this time and energy to discovering and creating your purpose. Because I don't think it's entirely one or the other, right? So that seemed pretty, like, I got that covered that adequately. That concept, right? So Ikigai is discovering your purpose, right? So number 2 is Shikita Ganai, and it basically translates as let go of what you cannot change. So all these concepts and ideas are things that I think we kind of do understand, but we don't, particularly here in Canada, and I would go so far as say U.S. or any other country that identifies as a Western world. We have an awareness of these things, but we don't identify them, and that's what I loved about this list of these eye-opening Japanese concepts, because they identified them and went out of their way. They coined a word to refer specifically to them. So. Again, to me, it's not only is intriguing, but it's incredibly informative, right? Because you can integrate these things into your lives, and I highly recommend that you do just that. But don't believe what I'm saying. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So Shikita Gai Nai, let go of what you cannot change. So it's kind of self-explanatory. It's just that. I used to call it the 5-minute rules. All right, so like that in 5 minutes, if it doesn't, or how did that work? If it's not going to matter in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 hours, 5 days, or 5 months, it's not worth your time. Right? That it has to be something of substance, and if it's not, then you let go of the things that you can't change. Like, life is life. It does what it does, right? That you don't have to have anxiety and stress over those things. That you don't need to ruminate about what has happened, particularly if it was beyond your ability to control. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean emotionally that you're going to be able to liberate yourself from it, because very often those things that you can't change, they come with some kind of an association or an attachment. So it's coming to terms with that, but I think it starts by the idea of that you understand that you have to let go of those emotions and those thoughts, particularly as it relates to those things that you simply can't change. You do the best that you can do, and then whatever occurs is what occurs. Okay, so any questions about that, or any comments you'd like to make?
I was gonna make a comment about how Ikigai, and I can't read it.
It's Shikita Ganai.
Yes, that rule and Ikigai, the first rule, I think they work in combination very well because it's a sense of discovery and letting go of what's too much.
Right. I think what you're going to find is all 7 of these really they overlap. Right. So it's a way. It's the way that you can approach life and living in terms of like guides that are not tied to well, the culture that you're raised in and the religion that you and I think that, and having said that, all that I don't think I don't think that these things are trying to cancel out all those other things. It's just gives you the capacity for maybe more direct insight, because we don't often directly, like, we have ethics and principles that are a result of like philosophical and religious ideologies and political ideologies and culture. But I think it's complementary to all that stuff, so that you can employ this as another way to sort of consider your life from day to day, right?
Yeah, this isn't a sociological thing. It's like a human experience.
That's right. So it's culturally, it's rooted in their culture. Now, does that mean that everybody in Japan's following this? Probably not. But the fact that it exists, and even if it comes out of its past and it's isn't as prevalent as it once was, doesn't make it any less valid, right? So, again, I would offer that something old is something new. Right? So here you go. Here's something new. The way, right? So the third eye-opening concept is Wabi-sabi, right? I hope I'm saying that correctly. And it means to find peace in imperfection, so that you're okay with life not meeting any expectations, or in fact, you could interpret it to mean to have no expectations. Right? Or to see the beauty in things that are imperfect. Because they're not perfect, that's what makes them beautiful. Because if they were perfect, you might kind of overlook them, because you go, oh, it's perfect. All right.
Yeah.
But what draws your attention is the imperfection in something, right? So maybe that's what grabs our attention. And the reality is, nothing in life is perfect, including yourself and others, right? So instead of striving for some kind of flawlessness, you find joy in the imperfections that make life unique, because that's really where uniqueness, where you'll find it is in the broken parts of things, right?
Yeah, and you can hear that in like poems and stories about art pieces, like literal paintings.
Yeah, so I think you can apply that. You can apply that to life, right? That, and all it implies is just a healthy appreciation of things as they are, without you expecting them to be somehow something more beyond what they are, as they present what it is that you're encountering. You just treat it for what it is. So I think it's got again, it resonates with me.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely has legs.
Okay, right on.
Like, sorry, I was gonna say, like, the expectation part of it also leads to like not having expectations, and then once you don't have expectations, you can more genuinely appreciate, and then
I think
it applies back to the other rules then.
Right. So I think it gives you the ability then to truly enjoy things as they are, because it doesn't have to meet any kind of a standard. There's no standard required. You take them for what they are. All right. Okay, we'll move on to number 4. Number 4 is Gaman. I believe that's how it's pronounced, and it's to preserve your dignity through tough times. So I think there's value in that too. Not the idea of like not letting yourself fall apart when everything's horrible around you. You have every right to fall apart, but start by digging deep and going, here, I got to find that ounce of courage so as not to fall apart, right? And I do this to preserve my dignity, my self-respect, as an act of self-respect. You could almost even equate it to an act of self-love.
I was going to say, it reminds me of Stoicism, just
again, there are parallels everywhere. I love Marcus Aurelius. Western philosophies are again something that I love. I've spent my life trying to integrate ideas from Socrates and Plato and Marcus Aurelius, and then Eastern philosophies like Lao Tzu, even Miyamoto Musashi. Again, we're gonna explore all that, but because I think that they all touch on this very same things, and they just express it in different ways, but they're essentially talking about the same things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Gaman represents or it could be interpreted as emotional maturity, self-control, especially when you're faced with challenges. Right. So it makes you patient, resilient, and understanding. So that's in the understanding that you're able to maybe let go of things, which is that Shikita Ganai, that it allows for you to be able to do that out of the understanding and patience, that you're able to sort of just go, here, I can't change any of this, you just let it go. Right. So I think it's a really great idea. It's something that's worth mentioning. Probably one of my favorites is number 6. Oh, sorry, we didn't do number 5 yet. Let me just cover number 5 first. And so I believe it's pronounced Oubaittori, and essentially it translates as don't compare yourself to others. So the worst thing you can do in terms of demoralizing yourself or to cause yourself grief and anxiety is to turn life into a comparison. Right? It's okay to aspire to accomplish the things that other people have accomplished, but I think that there's a real fine line there that you can very dangerously become. That you can look down on yourself or feel negativity because you feel like you don't measure up, or somehow, right, that your life that in that comparison, it makes you feel less than, which you shouldn't even be doing that. You should be avoiding comparing your life and comparing who you are with other people. Your only focus should be to realize who you are in your entirety. So this does overlap with everything we've been talking about in all the episodes.
I was thinking of a sports analogy where it's great to participate, but just to get that personal best or maintain like your current.
Yeah, I think the focus, like the moment that you turn it into a comparison, which is unfortunately something that goes hand in hand with consumerism, and when you treat each other like your competitors, so it's the very idea of, like, where the expression dog eat dog world, right? Like that, we struggle against one another in such a way, and that it's demoralizing. And so if you can make it worse by employing comparison. So you shouldn't be concerned with what other people are doing. So I think that's what lies at the root of it. You shouldn't be concerned with what anyone else is doing. Your focus should be on what are you doing.
I think once you have personal success, like personal best, you're in a better place to help others. Like, you don't necessarily have to be exactly concerned with them getting their own personal best, but just that they participated, put in that effort. Like, if you think about socially, we're all part of this network. It's very uplifting to have somebody who looks at themselves that, okay, I did good today, and then they help.
Well, I think recognizing like that your own efforts, I think, is important. I think, but that's part of cultivating gratitude. That, like, you're grateful for the fact that you showed up and you put your best foot forward, and to a greater or lesser extent there was some success in whatever it is that you did. I think there's value in that. I 100% wholeheartedly support that. But I think, again, like I said, we run an enormous disservice to ourselves when you start to treat it as though like it's a competition, which is hard to do because that's the way it works, particularly here in Canada and the US, that we're kind of, that it does to a significant degree inform the way people see each other, and then so therefore how you treat one another. So I think that's a danger. And I think as a counterbalance to that, Oubaittori offers that. It's like it's the reminder: don't compare yourself to others. Focus on your shit. Don't be focused on theirs, right? That there's no value in paying attention. You're wasting time paying attention to what other people are doing. Just the real question you should be asking: what am I doing, right? Agree, disagree? Don't think I.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, right on. Okay. All right. So number 6 is Kaizen, and this is the one I was saying that I got out of order. But this is one, again, my probably of the 7 is my favorite, and it's always seek to improve in all areas of your life. It's that attitude of that. Even if you make small changes in your life, that could lead to significant changes, right? So that you're constantly refining who you are, you're constantly striving to elevate yourself to the highest expression of who you are. So within popular culture, especially like the fitness industry, that you hear them, they've been, I guess for the last 10 years, they've been bashing around the best version of you. Well, it's not it's not a new idea, but it depends how you approach this idea. And I like the idea that what you're trying to do is elevate yourself to the highest capacity that you're capable of, or expressing your highest potential. I think, to me, it's a cornerstone in the way that I live. So, and I think that if people don't use it, it's to their detriment.
It's interesting. It sounds like a skill just to get to that point where you're able to try harder. Like you have to
it's not about trying harder. It just means that you're always seeking to improve in all areas of your life, right? Like that's how they define it. So that no matter what it is that you're doing, you're always looking to refine, to do things as best as you can, as best as possible. That I think there's real value in that.
I don't have the terminology to explain exactly, but I think the skill of finding ways in life that you can work on, because it's not so obvious all the time what's.
But I think it applies to it's not just you, but every aspect of life. I think that's the other part of it, that in all things that you do. So in your interactions with other people, the relationships you have, your professional relationships, the things you do at work. So it's not just. It basically you can use it in the way you address every aspect of the life that you live. So personally, that you're striving always for your best, and then you're striving to again find the best in everything that you do, from your occupation, and from that you show up and you present with you put your best foot forward. There's value in that, right? And people appreciate that. They see that, they acknowledge that. So I think if you just only give a shit about you, and then you go to your way to sort of you only can justify any course of action if there's an immediate reward for the course of action. I think this one implies that that it becomes its own reward. This process of always seeking to elevate yourself, to improve yourself in every capacity. I think that's something that, to a degree, might be actually missing here in North America. So I don't know. It could be argued. Now, I'm not trying to suggest one way or the other, but to me, as an observation, again, it's just an opinion. That if of this list, if it was the only one that people adopted, and I heard people walking around going, my Kaizen, and referring to it, I'd be like, that's cool. I don't expect it, but that'd be cool. Okay, so now we'll get on to number 7. So number 7 is it's referred to as Shu-Ha-Ri, right? And it's one of those weird ones. It's when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and when the student is truly ready, the teacher will appear. So all it suggests is that, so when the student's ready, a teacher will appear. So, and the teacher will provide instruction and support to elevate the student. And then when the student is truly ready, that second part, that the teacher will appear, it's because the student becomes the teacher.
That's how I thought I was interpreting.
Yeah, I think that's how it's interpreted. So
Yeah. Well, I've heard you mention before the truest teacher is like the experience. You can directly learn from it.
right. But so you as a teacher, you will when you evolve to a status of a teacher, you're always with the mind of the student. So the student and the teacher are never separate. You start out as the student. At some point, the student evolves to the ability then to become the teacher, and that the best teachers are still students.
Yeah, I've heard that across different cultures.
Yeah, right. So I think that again, it's really valuable. But when they refer to it, it's roughly translates as to keep, to fall, and to break away, or to follow the rules, break the rules, and transcend the rules. That's how that in Japanese. That's how they interpret it. So that essentially that before you can break away with everything, you kind of have to master everything, and then once there's mastery, then you can kind of blaze your own trail. You can find your own way, but it starts with this idea that you have to build a strong foundation, and that after you've created that strong foundation, then you can take creative liberties with that strong foundation. Now you spend all that time mastering all that stuff, and then now you have the capacity now to freely interpret it and to take it in creatively in any direction you want. So I think there's again another concept that has a huge amount of value, and maybe I don't see a ton of here in North America, right? So again, I may be wrong, but
I think iconic people share that, where they break from convention after becoming like conventionally good at something. Like any person we've talked about.
I think you're 100% right on it. I think it kind of goes without saying. I think that people who do achieve a level of mastery of anything, at some point, they start doing what I'm talking about, the creatively interpreting what they're doing, so they break with the rules, they transcend the rules, right? But first they master the rules, right? So the way there are 3 stages in acquiring knowledge. So the Shu-Ha-Ri. Let me try that again. Shu-Ha-Ri. Shu is learn the basics by following the teachings of one master. Imitating the work of great masters also falls in this stage. So it's like we were saying, you're creating this fantastic foundation, you're developing this skill base. So you put in the hours, you learn everything that there is to learn, you shape your life around it. And then Ha is when you start experimenting from the stuff you've learned from masters, not one master but multiple masters, and you integrate the learning into your own practice now. Like, so all those influences, you draw on all of them now to influence the way that you do things. And Ri is the 3rd stage, and it focuses on innovation, the ability to apply your learning to a variety of situations. So you can see where Shu-Ha-Ri is probably, shares a relationship with the martial arts, right? Because it is honestly, Shu-Ha-Ri, in terms of a word, perfectly describes what should go on in the course of anyone's evolution as a martial artist. But typically, most martial artists preserve their practice, the practice they're taught, in a time capsule. So they can they're doing it for 20 years and doing it exactly the same way. They don't deviate from the, right? So now they're practicing it in a time capsule. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but then you don't. I think then perhaps maybe that you might be missing the point, because the ultimate evolution then of the practitioner becomes them integrating everything they've learned. So now no matter what the foundation of the martial art is, it's really their martial art. Right, and what you'll discover, especially in Japanese martial arts, like karate particularly, a lot of them use suffixes with their names and their particular system of practice. So, like Weichi-Ru translates as style of Weichi, and then Karate-Do translates as empty-handed way. So Weichi-Ru Karate-Do literally translates as style of the empty-handed way, Weichi style. So I think those seven concepts are kind of really self-explanatory, and like I say, I really admire, especially the last two, 6 and 7. I'm super fond of, but that's only because they really do speak to the evolution of the individual, and that how important it is as somebody who's just starting out to put in all the effort and time to build this solid foundation in who you are, and then for the express purposes to evolve artfully into something that becomes a better expression of the uniqueness of you, right? But you do it based on learning and practice and understanding and the evolution of you. So it requires a significant investment of time to create that foundation, and then eventually to break from that foundation, to break away with it. Like I said, to me, it's the whole point of why somebody would take on the path of the lifetime path of practicing the martial arts. So you do it for a lifetime. This is how you do it for a lifetime. This is why you would do it for a lifetime.
I like how it makes sense. It's not specific just to martial arts. It applies to everything.
Honestly, it really does. But again, I think it kind of evolved as a result. Because remember that, particularly in Japan, for 1,000 years, their warrior caste ran the country. Right, and if you're not familiar with them, we're going to touch briefly on the samurai today. We're not going to, because that in and of itself is its own episode. But rest assured that we'll do that, only because again I'm super fascinated by them. Right, so
we already did a video on Bushido and Bushido Jutsu.
No. We're going to cover a lot of that stuff here.
I thought we already covered it on.
No, we touched on it. We didn't really get in to the Bushido, but we're going to explore it further in just a few moments. Another concept that's not included in that list of 7, and it's one I love, or it's this way to describe a person, place, or a thing. It's I believe it's pronounced Yugen, and it's a profound awareness of the universe that triggers feelings too deep for words. Right, like.
That kind of sounds consistent with all the other rules. Like, once you experience all of these and you live by these rules, you then have a more direct feeling.
I think it does, yeah. I think ultimately then what it does is that you start to cultivate a profound sense of yourself and the reality that you're living in, which is something I don't think people often talk about. I don't think which is something certainly worthy of conversation, but people typically don't. Right, which is it's kind of unfortunate, really.
Well, it's hard to talk about a more direct experience.
Well, yeah, but you can. I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying that when you being kind of to see the depth in everything around you, I think that comes from appreciating everything and having gratitude. But I don't think we talk about gratitude and appreciation for just the experience of being here and for life in general. The end result is that it gives you this perspective that's so profound that you suddenly can't express it in words. So you just don't.
Yeah, that makes it almost seem like mystical. But
well,
it's attainable.
Yeah, I think to a degree it might just be. I think it might be fair to describe it that way. It's not magic in the fictional sense. I hate to use this expression. It's real world magic.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like slightly veiled, but it's there.
Right. Okay. So having said that, now I think we're gonna move on to one of my. He's arguably probably the greatest samurai that ever lived, and he was a stone cold killer who essentially became a pacifist, right? And then to that end spoke to that end. But this is a guy who, in the context of North America and modern day society, some might call him a serial killer, right? But again, to be fair, I think what I'm going to do is we'll just start talking about Miyamoto Musashi. So he was a master, essentially a masterless samurai, right? And he lived from 1584 to 1645. He was a swordsman, philosopher, strategist, a writer. A ronin is a masterless samurai, and who became renowned through stories of his unique double-bladed swordsmanship. Because most samurai held a single sword with both hands, he used two swords all the time. All right, so and again, what sets him apart? Once Japan was under a single rule, they had no more internal wars to fight. So then what developed in the samurai culture was, we see it again, like played out in fiction, and particularly in something like The Mandalorian, and in the West, they were the equivalent of gunslingers, right? So they were a dualist culture. And so what they would do is they would challenge each other to duels, and they didn't always fight them to the death, but depending on who the duelists were, some would rather die than lose to somebody, right? So, and they would draw contracts. It wouldn't be something just like they would just say it and then suddenly start doing it. They would pick a date, they'd have time to prepare, and they'd turn it into an event. People would come to watch, right? So samurai would duel each other before audiences. Now, having said that, it's the thing that makes Miyamoto Musashi so unique is he successfully fought 61 duels. So he dispatched 61 people in peacetime, and not just average, ordinary, everyday people. It was other samurai. So it was other people whose area of specialty and who'd been trained since childhood to be combatants, right? So it speaks to how exceptional he was, and again, how in terms of like that culture, what distinguishes him, why he's so well distinguished is even the next most successful duelist in that culture was a man named Idasai, and he only had 33 of these duels, right? Now, having said that, Miyamoto retired from all of that, and then became he had it was a very personalized philosophy that borrowed heavily from Zen Buddhism, and Zen is a Japanese word for meditation. So it was a meditative form of Buddhism, and he essentially became a man of peace. But he's often known as a Kensai, and I hope I'm saying that right. And it literally translates as sword saint. It was the saint of swords, right? So again, a person who I've been endlessly fascinated with since I was young. Since the first time I was introduced to him, which was probably around 16 or 17. Like, I can't be sure now because it was so long ago. But he applied the Budo into art. He was a master of tea ceremony, poetry. This was a well-rounded individual. He wasn't just this two-dimensional kind of, killing machine, for lack of a better expression. So have you heard of him before?
Yeah, I've heard a few things, but I've never heard that he was a sword saint.
Yeah, that's how they refer to him in Japan.
That's a pretty cool title.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's gotta admit, right? So, but he wasn't just that. Remember, the guy, like, he sculpted in wood and metal. He was a master of calligraphy. He was a master of the tea ceremony. He was a writer who wrote philosophy and poetry. He painted, like. So this was an individual who was like well-rounded. It wasn't just. Although he had. He came from a low-ranking samurai family, and his story. We're gonna save it maybe when we do samurai exclusively, we'll do an episode on the samurai. We'll do a deeper dive into Miyamoto's Musashi's history, because his upbringing predisposed him to this. So, like, I think his first duel he fought when he was 14. Right, I guess another samurai. Like, so.
Is that an unusual age to start fighting?
Well, yeah, because typically, even though he raised as samurai, he would, and they start training them from the time they can walk. So, but at 14, it's still it's considered particularly young, like that you would be engaging in life and death duels.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
By today's standards, yeah.
but that's this guy's story. So that detracts, because I want to focus more on his philosophy, because this is about the way today, right? So we're gonna do we'll do an episode about the samurai, and we'll dive more deeper into Musashi's past. But having said that, he was not overtly religious, but he practiced Zen, and Zen translates as meditation, right? So, at his final years, he authored the books, the Book of Five Rings, and the Dakodo, right? And the Dakodo translates as the path of aloneness, the way to go forth alone, or the way of walking alone, right? It's the way. So, there's 25 principles in it, and I'm just going to read them off, and then if you have any comment, I'll pause after I read one, and you can comment on it, or I'll offer up some kind of comment. But the Dakodo wasn't really a book, where the Book of Five Rings was more like a philosophical treaty, right? Dakodo was something. It was more like a short book, right? So, the 21 principles of the Dakodo. 1, accept everything just the way it is. So you can see now where those seven Japanese concepts. It's kind of it's evolving out of the Budo and out of the philosophies of practitioners of Bushido, right? Which Miyamoto was, right? So accept everything the way it is, right? They just let shit go. You take it for what it is. You don't invest nothing. Don't expect anything beyond what it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. So it's not saying that you can't experience pleasure, but you shouldn't be driven to seek things that are pleasant or pleasurable. That like you when they present themselves, you take advantage of them, but you don't actively pursue them. You don't make your life about pleasure, which is essentially what number 2 is saying. Number 3, do not undertake any circumstances, and do not undertake any circumstance depend on partial feeling. So, if you're going to do something, you need to be completely committed, and you should understand what it is that you're doing, right? So you shouldn't kind of be wishy-washy about whether or not you're going to do something. If you're in, then you're in, right? Anything you'd like to add?
No. No, I'm good.
Okay, right. Number 4, think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world, right? So again, it expresses this idea that you take life seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Right? I think it's a fair way to translate it, and I think you hear that that's an expression that's used here in the West. Okay, so number 5, be detached from desire your whole life long. So don't allow desires to drive you. That shouldn't be your motivation, right? Like with the things that you desire, right? That you should be driven more by form and function, so that you pursue things because it's the evolution of self. Desires are more about satisfying like some kind of self-interest, right? Right? Does it make sense?
Yeah, there's no real meaning or purpose. It's just in vain.
Right. That's right. So don't service vanity. Don't live in vanity. That's a perfect way to describe it. So number 6 is do not regret what you have done. So once something's happened, it's too late now to start second guessing yourself or questioning what you were doing. It's done. So the smartest probably the healthiest you can do is just move on from that point, right? No matter how difficult it may be, and I would say that it's probably always going to be difficult, right? No matter what, but it doesn't make it any less true, right? That don't regret. It's already happened. It's too late. Regrets a waste of again potentially a waste of emotion, energy, and it only leads to stress and anxiety, which none of us actually really need. It prevents you from being able to get onto the business of not just living, but addressing issues that you're confronted with. So problem solving, right? So you waste a lot of energy on why something happened instead of dealing with the fact that it's happened. So now you got to move on from that point, right? So again, you can see the value in that. 7, never be jealous. So it was a thing about comparing yourself to others, right? Never cave into again, desires overlap with that, but you shouldn't be making comparisons with other people. Your focus should be on what are you doing. That's where you should put your energy. What is it that you're doing, right? So 8 is never let yourself be saddened by a separation. So we've all experienced separation, and it is an emotional thing. You respond emotionally. It hurts, right? But I think it's he's saying here, never let yourself be saddened by it. I think it's okay to be sad, but you can't wallow in that. That can't be the focus. If you turn that into your focus, you'll suffer further, more than you would if you allowed yourself to experience that sadness. You give it its moment, and then you go, okay, it's done. I feel shitty. Time to move on, right? Okay, number 9, resentment and complaint are appropriate neither for oneself or others. So don't waste your time judging and complaining and having a resentment with yourself or with others. That again, it's something that it's a distraction. It takes away, it disempowers you. So you end up robbing yourself as a result of it. You're devoting energy to something that'll accomplish nothing. Complain about somebody else or to resent them for what they did. They did what they did. Now you're left to deal with it. So it's a waste of your energy and time to complain about it or to spend the time assigning blame, right? You're better served by moving on to whatever problem solving is required.
I think mentally that's a better state of mind to have, because if you're in a resentful emotional state, you're going to react instead of just act.
Yeah, I agree. So we've discussed this before. So it's the ability to be able to choose a course of action over reacting to things as they've occurred. So again, I think the value is self-evident. All right. So number 10, do not let yourself be guided by the feelings of lust or love. That again, that's super complicated. So I'm not going to try and address that not in its entirety. I'll comment on it, but the idea of lust and love, I think that would be an episode in itself, right? So, but ultimately, lust and love is as much as it outwardly appears about your affections for another person. I think it's more about you, the individual, and what you want is you're seeking acknowledgement, and you're doing it by putting it all on someone else. So or to love them or to lust after them, however you would choose to express it.
Yeah, like a certain outcome is desirable.
Right, but it may not be genuine.
Right.
Right.
It could be an obsession.
Oh well, I would agree, but then why are you pursuing it? Because you're seeking some form of validation in the pursuit of love or lust, right? That you're just looking to validate yourself, and that maybe that's what he's speaking to. That perhaps that then that when you approach things like that it's selfish and out of self-interest, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't have relationships and even intimate ones, but I think you have to sort of take them at face value. You take them for what they are, and then instead of investing more into them, because again, people experience a lot of negativity from being unwanted by the people they want to love them, right? So this it can lead to all sorts of stress, anxiety, and duress. So I think maybe that's what he's referring to, that the more negative aspects of it. So instead of actively seeking it, perhaps maybe you might be better served by, if it presents itself, you take advantage of it, but you're not actively you're not allowing it to influence and guide your life and your behavior. Okay. Number 11, in all things have no preferences. So we talked about this earlier. It's kind of come up from episode to episode where he talks about he's talking about no preferences. So it's that idea that you not to have aversions to bad experiences and to only want pleasant experiences. You just accept things for what they are. You don't prefer things one way or the other. It's kind of almost meaningless, at least in terms of the way that he's presenting it here. There's almost no relevance to preference other than it being an expression of your again, self-interest.
Yeah, especially if you're in the consumer mind state, it's easy to have preferences.
Well, but people selling stuff are counting on that. They want you to, right? Because then that way they can service that preference and then provide something consumable to that end. But if you have no preferences, then people can't exploit you, in a manner of speaking, right?
Yeah, like commercials for toys or whatever.
Or even like your favorite types of food, like the things that you'll eat obsessively, or that you lust after. I desire to have a marshmallow chocolate cookie, or whatever.
Yeah,
what it is, right?
If you're watching commercials for these, it's almost like obvious, like how performed it is.
Right, and because it's trying to capture, for a percentage of the people watching, it's trying to capture their attention, and hopefully that it reflects what they want, and so then they'll put it in their mind, so now they'll actively seek it, right? So that's number 11. Number 12 is to be indifferent to where you live. So it shouldn't matter to you, as long as there's a roof over your head, that's good enough. Like, you don't need opulent palaces. You just need to be protected from the elements. You need a place where you can prepare food, relative quiet, where you can sleep in relative peace. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're all in agreement for number 12. Number 13. Do not pursue the taste of good food. So I can appreciate why he's saying that, but I don't entirely agree. I think I'm not a foodie or anything like that, but I do enjoy eating, and I do enjoy the foods I do like to eat. But I can understand why he's saying that, because again, it becomes a reflection of your preferences, or right, more about your self-interest. And I think that his view was that you lead an austere life, that if you have food, it's good enough. You don't need you don't need to have, again, a preference or a particular type. As long as it's edible and it meets the needs for nourishment and nutrients, then it's good enough. I think that's his view, right? So number 14, do not hold on to the possessions you no longer need. So if you don't need something, there's no need, which is kind of funny. There's no need to accumulate things that you don't need. But here in Canada and the US, I think that's all we do, don't we? Just accumulate shit that we don't use and just put it in boxes and call it collectibles, or keep it in storage or something like that, right? Like, so.
Like, if it's a car, I can understand.
But that has a very practical function. So I think he's just talking about possessions like knickknacks, things that you don't use with any regularity, that have no function other than they're amusing.
Well, I was going to state, if you have a car that's functional, it's not damaged, but
Well,
you buy
but-
an even more expensive car just for the hell of it.
Well, I think like a car is because it does have a very practical function. So whether it's high end or low end, I guess that's entirely up to you. If it's within your means, but then it becomes a reflection of preference, right? So I think his point is, why would it matter what kind of car it is, as long as it functions, it serves to get you to where we're going. So
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
he would be a guy who would be just as happy riding a horse as he would be riding a mule, right? Like or a donkey for that matter.
This is the type of guy that would draw wolves.
Maybe. Number 15, do not act following customary beliefs. So tradition and customs, that I think that what he's saying is that, like, we explored this when we talked about the 10 logical fallacies, the appeal to tradition, the idea that, well, you know, it's the way we've always done it, and that maybe that you should have some level of awareness that maybe the tradition may not always necessarily be the best way to do something or to address things. So I think there's some value in that too, and and again, it's not to treat it like a preference. So you can have the tradition in place and you can honor the tradition, but you don't treat it with like value. As soon as something presents itself that presents better value or is more efficient, then maybe that perhaps might be a better substitute for the traditional way of doing something, right? So, let's see here. Number 16, do not collect weapons or practice weapons beyond what is useful. So that's the samurai talking, right? So his view was you in terms of like fighting stuff, you only need what you need to fight with. So in samurai culture, they were spearsmen, archers, and swordsmen, right? So and they used a host of weaponry. His area, he's the sword saint. His area of specialty was just sword work, right? And again he broke with tradition. Tradition was, it was a single sword. They carried more than one sword, but you would use any sword with two hands, and that was their style. Their sword fighting style was a two-handed style. He broke with that tradition, and he used two swords single-handedly. So again, making him again exceptional, whatever, at being a duelist, right? So you can see again the value in why he would say that, do not collect weapons beyond what is useful, right? Just the stuff that works. All right, number 17, do not fear death. Kind of always been fascinated by that, and it seems that every warrior culture, that goes hand in hand with it. That one of the first things that you come to terms with death and dying, and that not to fear him, not to have an emotional kind of resentment or attachment in some form to it, that you accept it for what it is. It's just a part of life, and then without it having to be anything more than that. So I find that very, very liberating kind of view, especially as someone who's like, as a child, was just terrified by the idea, right? So anyway, having said that, any thoughts with regard, or anything a comment you'd like to make with do not fear death?
For a warrior culture, totally makes sense.
But I think even for any culture, period, I don't think that you have to. Yeah, I don't think, because it doesn't matter what culture you're raised in. I think that
I think it's specifically useful for them because they're going to die
very
sooner possible.
Right, but it's an inevitability that we all share it. We're all going to experience it. So that maybe it might be more beneficial at an earlier age to just learn to cultivate an acceptance of it and just be okay with it. You don't have to fear it. You don't have to live in fear of it. You don't have to have anxiety about it. It's just a part. It's part of life, right?
Well, that's why I think so many. That's why I think so many of these rules are, something about them is very nice. But I think it's more along the lines of it's something we all experience as individuals.
Sure, but I think here I go that's true. So they're kind of universal, but you also see how they're specific to that samurai culture. right? Like that, like where there'd be immediate benefit in somebody who's living,
Yeah.
who's samurai literally translate as one who serves, right? Like so.
Like you would have to change some of the words around, like master one weapon only, or don't carry excess weapons.
Right, but that I mean it's all good, but I think the ideas are they do kind of make sense, right? So and we'll move on to 18. Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age. So it means don't plan for retirement.
Fiefs?
Like a fiefdom, a kingdom, like a little, right?
Okay.
Right. So which is kind of counterintuitive to everything that you're taught about here in Canada and the U.S. Where you got to save for retirement or you got to plan for retirement, and he's like, you don't plan for any of it. You just live. Right? And again, something liberating about that idea, right? That is it practical? I don't know. I mean, clearly not. Right?
It might have been back in
life expectancy was probably people didn't live nearly as long. He was considered long-lived, and he lived only into his 60s. Right, for that time, people, right, but it's just. I think it's just more of a reflection of the understanding that like it all comes to a close. So in preparing for it, you're preparing for something that may or may not come. It might be in their eyes considered a waste for preparing for something. I like for retirement. Now here it's a cornerstone of some of the financial institutions here in North America, right? So
Well, instead of working, I'm sure he had more time to spend with the people around him.
Well,
So
he had acolytes, right? Because, like I said, he became a man of peace. He was, and he had all this prestige from this life that he lived. That, like, he really was a man living in a cave, right?
Yeah, I guess if he has a nice place, it's hard to take that rule from him, but it applies definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's fair. We'll just so now we'll just move on to number 19, and he states, respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. So I think the idea of like that for whatever religious ideologies that are out there, that you don't shit on them, you don't poo-poo the idea of what they're presenting, but you don't need to be dependent on them in any way, right? So which is, again, I think here in North America, it's a mixed bag. It's a grab bag of mixed stuff. That you have a lot of people who live in honor of their religious ideologies, and then you have many who just they acknowledge them, but then that's it. They don't go anything beyond the acknowledgement of it. They live their lives however they would deem fit, right? So I think it might be alluding to that. Number 20, you may abandon your own body, but you must preserve your honor. So nothing is more important than your honor. So even if it means the destruction of your physical body,
I can see that coming from a warrior.
Yeah. 100%. So again, it's all in context, right? The fact that he was a samurai, right? So, and 21, never stray from the way. Sorry, that was a long list to get through to get back to what this entire episode is about, the way, right? And Miyamoto he's quoted as saying there are many paths to the top of the mountain, right? So I think that much is clear by those 21 principles. Okay, so we're going to move on to Bushido, and Bushido literally translates or means way of the warrior. And the Bushido is a code of conduct, a way of life that's associated specifically with the samurai. And it's loosely analogous to the Western concept of chivalry or knighthood and stuff, right? It was medieval Japan's version of a knight, but there was such a body of philosophy that rose that rose around that occupation that wasn't necessarily religious, right? Whereas with medieval Western chivalry and knighthood and knights, they tended to borrow heavily from Judeo-Christian beliefs, right? So again, one better than the other? I don't know. This just has more appeal to me myself, right? Because I'll never do an episode on Western knights, right? The Samurai Code was influenced by teachings of Zen Buddhism as well as Confucianism. So we're going to touch on Confucianism briefly. And Zen in Japanese it's the word they use for meditation, right? So it's a form of Mahayana Buddhism that stresses the practice of meditation as the key to enlightenment. It is characterized by mental discipline, calmness, austerity, and effort. So, and in that 21 principles, you can see where that's reflected in there, this idea that you just need enough to be able to meet those basic needs. Beyond that, all that, there's no need for extra. You just need enough to be able to fend off starvation, and everything should be about practice and elevation of the self and enlightenment of the self and the creation of like mental discipline the creation of it and calmness, especially in the face of like duress and stress, and I think everybody finds an appeal in the idea that you could be calm and at peace and centered even in the midst of like terrible things going on around you. You can see why that would be favorable, preferable, and it's still relevant well into today, right?
I don't know when it wouldn't apply to people.
I like I said, I think it absolutely works. So that form of Buddhism, that Mahayana Buddhism, is the one that usually is associated with like tea ceremony in the Zen gardens. People are. I'm sure most people are aware of it. They've seen memes of it throughout social media, that sort of thing, and koans. We're going to get to the koans. I believe that's how it's pronounced. We're going to get to that shortly. The Zen originated in India as a non-verbal doctrine communicated directly by the Buddha to his followers, and it was later taken to China by the monk Bodhidharma. Okay, so Bodhidharma is in Chinese martial arts and in Japanese, because in Japanese he was referred to as Damo, I believe is how they pronounce it, was a legendary Buddhist monk who lived during the 5th or 6th century in the Common Era. And he played a seminal role in the transmission of Zen Buddhism from India to China, where it is known as Chan. So in Japan it's called Zen Buddhism, in China they refer to it as Chan Buddhism. He is considered the Zen Buddhist he is considered by the Zen Buddhist the 20th patriarch, and the lineage that traced directly back to Gautama Buddha himself. Bodhidharma is also credited with founding. Okay, here we go. Here's the famous martial arts connection. Founding the Shaolin School of Chinese martial arts. Right? So he was also known as the Triptaka Dharma Master. Right? So anyway, so that I find that kind of interesting, right? So that there's cross influences there, and Bodhidharma, that Shaolin Temple literally translates as like mountain tree temple. That's what the Shaolin translates as, right? So again, very interesting, right? That in terms of the way, that it was part of the foundation of the way is some kind of form of mental discipline, which meditation, again, often discussed it and talked about it as a tool of training, right? And so if you favor that calm state, that you can produce it as a result of that training method, that you can maintain that, sustain that, even under duress. Okay, so during some Zen practices in martial arts, they use these things called koans, right? And these koans are they're kind of like they're kind of it's phrases and expressions that you could use as a transcendental, like in transcendental meditation. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, maybe it's better if I cite an example. Two hands clap and there's a sound. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Right? So it's this contemplation thing that and there's there are like said to be about 1,700 of these koans in all, right? And so that one, the sound of one hand clapping is kind of has probably more commonly understood thanks to martial arts movies and stuff like that, right? Right, again, it was used by in practices, meditative practices, as a way of training novices to keep their mind focused and present, and it would do the same thing as a transcendental meditation, which is just the repetition of a mantra to that end. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I quite understand the koan.
The koan is like each koan represents a communication of some aspect of Zen teaching, and it's a test of the student's understanding. Zen teachers often recite and comment on koans, right? So it's this thing where you try to encapsulate a Zen principle in a phrase or an expression, so that it forces you to kind of go through mental gymnastics to try and wrap your head around it, and they use it as a training tool, right? So it's part of the meditative practice. So you could use a koan instead of a mantra.
Okay.
Right. So in transcendental meditation, right, it's a mantra, which is a phrase that's repeated over and over again, right? Well, you can essentially use any kind of statement, my baloney has a first name. You could do that.
For a mantra.
For a mantra.
But a koan is like a question almost.
But that encapsulates some kind of Zen idea, right? So what's this, how would it be any different than saying, hey, when a tree falls in the forest, if there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound?
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Right?
I'd say yes, though.
Okay, that works. That works for me too. Right. So Confucianism. And the only reason I'm going to touch on this is because it did inform the way Miyamoto. Because there was a lot of influences from China to Japan, right? They're really closely associated. So which is kind of, so it shouldn't surprise anybody that noteworthy people, they have an awareness of them in both cultures, in both countries, right? So and they do overlap. They treat them with reverence and respect. So, and Confucius was one of those individuals. Now, he was referred to this, or his whole East Asian school of ethical, philosophical, and religious thought originally developed from teachings of the early Chinese sage Confucius. And so the school was the school of scholars, or the religion of Kong is how they refer to it. And so its primary focus, again, is like ethics. It was about behavior, the cultivation of civility, interpersonal ethics, morality. That was the focus, where that became the thing that you discussed and questioned in terms of how to behave as a human being within a complex society and what would be required. So that's influencing somebody like Miyamoto, who's basically, he's a stone cold killer, right? So
I wouldn't call him stone cold, but he's able to be.
Yeah, it's just a capacity to who he is,
yeah.
Right? Like, so it doesn't detract from him as an individual. It doesn't take away anything from him. I'm just simply stating that, like, the complexity of the time and what he was. He was part of a warrior caste. It was a country that was ruled by that very warrior caste for, I can't remember specifically, but it might have been close to 1,000 years, right? So
Like in his depths, there's more than just what he mastered. There's also
right,
the things he was
right,
attempting.
and the things that he did. So the fact that he was a duelist is a small, minor part of who he is, even though that's the thing that most people focus on initially, right?
Yeah, especially since he hit such a high status.
Yeah, well,
it's interesting.
it's
to think
hard.
Like he's still a person.
And not many ever get that title, sword saint, right? Like,
Was there others?
I don't think so. I'll when we get into the samurai, I'll be able to answer that question. We'll find out if there's a list of them. Okay, so because there's so much overlap between those countries, societies, and cultures in Asia, there's a lot of cross influence from different philosophies and ideologies. So the Wudang Taoists of China, it's not a religion. They were more like philosophers who practiced the martial arts, and then were the living embodiment of Taoism, which was their philosophy that is often confused with being a religion, but it tends to not have the dogmatism typically associated with religions. So, and why is that noteworthy? Because the Tao in Chinese literally translates as the way, right? So it's a common theme in Asia, and again, we see it in pop culture today. So it's kind of fascinating that, and I think there's more value to it than just what's alluded to in that form of entertainment, right, in pop culture. So
yeah, like it's been represented in many different words, but like cross-culturally, it's interesting. It never really stopped.
Well, because I think it's still relevant to people who live in the Far East. Again, is it kind of infused with like modern day sensibilities? For sure. So it's not exactly the way that it was practiced, say, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever.
Well, apparently there's many of the ways.
Well, there's many. It's like Miyamoto said, that there's more than one path to the top of the mountain, more than one way to the top of the mountain. So it's just simply a matter of finding your way, right? So having said that, so Tao literally translates as the way, and it's the natural. It's really the study of the natural order of the universe in terms of various philosophies, and it emphasizes harmony with the way that you live. That you find a way to integrate yourself with the way, which is seen as principle and the source of all things that exist, right? So Taoism, the way, emphasizes virtues like Wu Wei, which we kind of touched on before, which is effortless action, right? We did talk about it in one episode.
Yeah.
And Ziran, which is naturalness, and Pu, which is simplicity and spontaneity. So it has a less of an emphasis on norms and rituals as opposed to Confucianism, right? This was more about like you coming and it's not coming to terms. It's more where you kind of where you're integrating yourself into the natural order of things, that you experience your connection more directly, and then it's why these ideas like naturalness comes up, and simplicity and spontaneity and effortless actions, why there's values assigned to that. So, and they also had placed an emphasis on like or personal alchemy or internal alchemy, which was rooted in Qigong, which is a moving form of meditation that they would incorporate in their practices and I don't know that it was meant to be like literal immortality, as opposed to more like the idea that, it's a spiritual immortality, right? So again, you could spend hours talking about that, which we won't. But that was, in terms of Taoism, it's a reference to the way. Now I'm going to go back to karate do. So the word karate is a combination of actually two Japanese characters, kara meaning empty, and te meaning hand. Thus, karate literally translates as empty hand. Now, adding the suffix do means way. So karate do implies, the way of life. Like, it goes well beyond self-defense applications. It's more about the state of mind, that your mind is open in terms of the way, right? Because it's not karate's not a purely empty-handed system. They have an entire component which is weapons based, right? So it's not that it's this martial art that rose up around that to only service self-defense with an empty hand. It alluded to something more significant, the idea that your mind is open and receptive, and that's the way. That is the way, right? So Sanchin in Weichi Karate Do is formed out of two Chinese words, San, which means three, and Chin, which means battle or conflict, right? So the primary foundational kata of this system of karate is translated as three conflicts, but it's also more typically understood as translating into like meditation and movement. It's the struggle to unify mind, body, and spirit. Right. So ultimately, what is the way serve? It becomes it's the manifestation of the idea that you have to unify all those different aspects of the individual, right? And so that's where the conflict comes from. It's a struggle to do that, to unify all those three elements. So this is the way, right?
Yeah, open-handed, receptive, and it has like a balance between the three, like the Trinity.
Yeah, right. Well, because what you're trying, different Trinity. What you're trying, what the conflict arises from attempting to integrate mind, body, and spirit. Right. So I think to me that's foundational. To me, that's my culture. That's the thing that I aspire to. Right. And it's informed my life for 30 plus years. So I to me, there's greater value in that mental discipline than there was in all the punching and kicking that I've done in my entire life, right? And an expression I often heard when I first started was that martial arts are 90% mental and 10% physical. So there you go. You take that from that what you will. All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the 5 spirits of Buddha, right? So can I get a quick time check?
Yep, right now we're an hour and 20 minutes in.
Okay, perfect. So this is going to be good. I think you're going to like the 5 spirits of Buddha, or Bushido, which is again derived from samurai. One of the interesting things about karate was that the integration of the samurai philosophy into the karate practice was to legitimize karate more in Japan at that time. So it was done very intentionally to try and elevate the status of it, because to be fair, karate is only about 100 years old, right? Okay, so, and it's not it's not simply a Japanese version of Chinese martial arts. There's lots of elements of that, but it's also because it was birthed in the Ryukyu Kingdom, which is an island off of mainland Japan, and it's referred to as Okinawa. So that Ryukyu Kingdom, they were the crossroads of like Asia and the Philippines and Southeast Asia, like all the islands. right? So they were at the crossroads. So they were the stopping over point when people were traveling back and forth. So there was a lot of influence that came from all over Asia, right? And eventually then the practice evolved once the samurai dominated the Roikyu kingdom and abolished the caste system, and then the martial arts or that form of karate in Okinawa became widespread in terms of use within Okinawa, and then from Okinawa moved to mainland Japan. So it's relatively new, but it's based on, again, long-standing traditions. It's not like something just newly springing out of somebody's mind. It was the evolution of all these different influences from, like, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, right? So it's the ultimate distillation of that. Now, part of that is these 5 spirits of Buddha, which are mental states, right? So it's a reflection of mental states. So this, I think, you'll find really interesting. And again, I've always been fascinated with these. And Shoshin is the first one in the list, and it translates as the beginner's mind, an aptitude of openness, eagerness, and no preconceptions of how to perform techniques. So it's this idea, like, it's the enthusiasm of the beginner, right? It demonstrates a willingness to learn. That's, you know, it's that thing where you're hunger to be able to do more, learn more, and you're constantly striving, especially when you're at the beginning of the training. You really want to do well, and it's what driving it. It's that beginner's mind. So you're not burdened with at the beginning, you're not burdened with all these ideas about how you're supposed to do something. So you're kind of interpreting it and internalizing as best you can, right? And so then it's kind of chaotic in this expression. It's kind of unruly, but that makes it interesting in and of itself because of that, right? Does that make sense to you?
Is it kind of like refining the form you're using?
I know, it's an aptitude of openness and eagerness. It's where it's like the enthusiasm's so potent that you don't have all the skills in place.
Oh, so you're not refining the skill at first, it's just enjoying the message.
Well, you're just trying to learn it, and you're trying to learn so much that it makes you unpredictable, and makes the individual unpredictable. They're more chaotic in the way that they present and do things because they haven't spent all that time refining what they're doing. I'll share interesting stories with you. There's many times where a black belt would eat a punch from a white belt because the white belt did something completely unexpected. Because within the limits of what they've learned, they were working with that limited information, so they were freely interpreting it. And then you have black belts who are so dogmatic that they didn't know how to respond to that, so they end up eating a punch. Right? So
that's unfortunate.
Right. So then as a black belt, you want to cultivate the Shoshin, right? And that's the beginner's mindset, this idea like you're enthusiastic, that you're recklessly just going to do stuff. A little bit of, you season it with a little bit of chaos, right? So I think there's, again,
it's like structured play.
But to have an awareness of it, yeah, that you're not forcing things to be something. You accept them for what they are, and then you kind of just deal with it as it happens. I think that's the beginner's mind allows for that randomness, unpredictable behavior, because they're not coming from a significant base, right? So and as a black belt or somebody as an advanced practitioner, it's a mindset that's beneficial, right? So
I can see the application with your example.
It works because it works. Like I said, I've seen it often where they just because they're so dogmatic, they had no idea how to deal with somebody like that, right? Because they're just enough skill that they kind of know what they're doing, but they're just kind of giving all they got. They're where they're compensating for where their shortcomings with enthusiasm and energy and stuff, and they bring that to it, and you end up having something really super interesting happening. All right, so we'll get on to Spirits of the Buddha number 2, and that's the lingering mind. It's called San-Shin. It's the lingering mind, state of mind where you are totally in the now, right? In the present moment, a state of complete awareness of the environment and surroundings, relaxed but aware and alert, right? So it's usually what they use is an 8-pointed star to sort of illustrate what it is, and that is that you're kind of a total awareness of your surroundings. You're totally dialed in, but you're not anxious. You're at ease. You're perfectly calm. And again, you can appreciate where that type of mindset would have an appeal to anybody. Never mind where you're from, right? This ability to maintain alertness and awareness, but you're relaxed. You're not, what's going on? You're not anxious, right? So, anything like add to that?
My instincts just went to like people that rage quit when they're playing video games. They're not in the mental space to be playing video games. They're in this competitive, I gotta win.
That's not Sanshin.
It's not Sanshin.
That's not Sanshin. It's relaxed but aware and alert.
They're unrelaxed playing something
but,
entertaining.
Okay, but that's what it's saying. That to cultivate or you aspire to that mind state, to be relaxed and aware and alert all at the same time, even though that might not seem like it's kind of counterintuitive that maybe you couldn't be able to be all those things at once. And I think you can, right? So we'll move on to number 3, which is Mu-Shin. And Mu-Shin translates as no mind. It literally means mind of no mind or empty mind. And again, this goes to the concept that we were talking about with karate, right? Karate, empty-handed way. That this idea that you're open and receptive, your mind's not closed, you're prepared, you're ready for anything, right? So you could think of Mu-Shin as a state of mind where there's no distortion of thought, and yet you're still acting. So there's no structured thinking and thoughts anymore. There's awareness and then action, right? That's what Mu-Shin allows for. So we talked about this when we were talking about Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and the flow state. So Mu-Shin, you could loosely say, might be the zone, like the athlete's experience, right? And that was popularized by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the idea that you could be in this completely dialed-in state where you're engaged, you're creative, and you're present, and you're good to go, right? So you can think about it that way. A good example that has been cited to me is that you equate it to like driving a car. When you first learn to drive a car, there's a little bit of trepidation because you're trying to remember to do everything correctly and to follow the rules of the road. That's all that stuff, right? After enough time has passed where you're continually driving, you stop consciously thinking about it. It's a skill and function that you carry out without giving a tremendous amount of forethought to. So that's, again, it would be a perfect analog for this idea of flow state or Mu-Shin, mind of no mind, where you're present, but you don't have to exert any effort to maintain that degree of competency or skill presentation. You're just able to do it. So you can see the appeal in that, right? And the weird thing is, the car analogy demonstrates that everybody does it, or has the capacity to do it. Maybe that's the only reason why you should learn how to drive.
To master the flow state of driving.
Why not?
I mean, I assume if you're driving at 300 miles an hour in an ambulance. You know, they've got some expertise under their belt.
Well, you would hope, right? One would hope. Okay, so we'll move on to number 4, right? And it's Photoshin. And Photoshin is the immovable mind. And it represents a mind that is totally at peace in every situation. No fear in the immovable mind. A mind filled with courage and determination. It is the state of complete composure and peace. So it's the ultimate expression of like calm. So the way is the way of being so present that you're calm and you just do whatever is required to do without hang up or second guessing anything that you're doing, because you're not spending your time worrying or being nervous over what's the best course of action or what to do. You're simply the action, right? It's again, to me, that's very appealing. I don't know, but those of you who are watching or listening to this, all 2 of you, yeah, do you find any of that kind of, the immovable mind, the appeal of it is it's this freedom from your emotions like fear, anger, doubt. These are the things that paralyze people, prevent them from being able to do what they need to do. So cultivating an immovable mind would give you the ability then, it's not that you're invincible, it just gives you the sense that you're completely present and that you're prepared to do whatever it is you need to do. And you can see where that now has that would appeal to a warrior culture like the samurai, and how it might be an integral part of trying to train somebody, because they would train to that end. Remember, all this stuff that we're talking about, they had more than a casual passing awareness of. For some of them who practiced it, it was the whole purpose of what they did. Anything is to cultivate these mind states, these spirits, this a way to approach life and living, right? In peace and in war, right? So, any comment? Nothing? You got nothing?
No, I was just thinking along the lines of like that sense of peace they have, where any troubling thoughts that come their way, unless it's something they have to act on, it's not like they don't perceive it, it's that they perceive it, but they don't hold it paramount.
Right, and it doesn't end up influencing their behavior. So then they allow for the thoughts to come and go. Why? Because they understand the transitory nature of them. If you're patient, it'll leave. It'll get replaced by another one. Yeah. So then the idea is not to treat them with value, which is kind of where stress and anxiety comes from, because every thought you have, you suddenly find yourself agonizing over it, and then you suffer as a consequence of that. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the exact antithesis of the chill dude.
Okay, so then maybe that's the ultimate expression. The way is the chill dude. It's the way of the chill dude. Right?
The Lebowski.
The Big Lebowski. I don't know that guy was exactly the chill dude. But
he was not, no. But this idea of patience. And
that I think that you can cultivate that in a single life. I think that again goes kind of and it's inherent in certain kind of training and practices. So for sure in the martial arts, and absolutely in meditation. All right, so again, it illustrates why meditation, right? Remember, Zen translated as meditation. Why there's an appeal for that. It's a method of training that produces this very specific mental states that have nothing to do with your mind running away and freaking you out and turning you into a stress junkie. It's basically opposite of all of that.
Yeah, like if you don't have patience, if you don't have, I don't exactly know what you said, reverence for like life in general.
Right, because that's how you cultivate gratitude or appreciation. Look, you're splitting hairs when you use those words. They essentially mean the same thing.
Okay.
Right?
But I just mean, like, if they're not going to approach this as, like, their ultimate end goal to be patient, happy, not happy specifically.
Well,
It's like, if you don't take care of that, it's going to disintegrate as you get older. So why not
right?
take care
Or
of it?
so if you're not master of self, you'll be mastered by yourself. And don't be confused. I know it sounds confusing, but there's truth in the statement. We can just break it down real quickly. So if you don't master yourself, so if you're not master of your psychology, your biology, and your spirituality, those things will run your life. And they'll run it recklessly, because now you'll just spend all your time being reactionary instead of choosing a course of action. So San Chin, remember, it's the ultimate personal struggle. It's the moving meditation so that you can achieve unity of mind, body, and spirit. So, but that has to be somewhere in the list of purposes that you have as an individual. That has to be something that you openly acknowledge. So the way could be then seen as the way to unify mind, body, and spirit. And then you find one that works within your sensibilities. But then whatever the modality is, it won't matter, because the outcome will essentially be the same. It'll just be a reflection of your sensibilities, right? But in terms of like the kind of mental states it'll produce, this list of 5 spirits of Buddha would be present whether you even heard of the 5 spirits of Buddha or not. Right, this idea of an immovable mind, and like that's not that that it's not tied or weighed down by whatever its experience. It's always at peace. That it's the mind of no mind, where the mind is not responding wildly and recklessly to what's going on and overwhelming you. That you're completely composed. And your mind's completely at ease, regardless of how crazy the circumstances are going on around you. Surely that would have some appeal, or be the kind of thing that people could see the value in, even in a modern society like the ones that we live in, where we're burdened with social media and smartphones and TVs and the list goes on and on and on. So again, as a counter balance to all these things that we're exposed to, these old philosophies, are something new, right? So, and that's why we're discussing, because something old is something new. So, we did last was the immovable mind. Now we're going to talk about number 5 of the spirits of Buddha, Senshin, which is enlightened mind, and it's the highest level of the 5 spirits of Buddha. And it's the state of mind where you hold all life as sacred. Your mind and spirit have become one. It's that state, right? So, the unity, mind, body, and spirit. It's the result of mind and spirit unifying, and then then you start to treat all life as though it were sacred, right? So I don't know. To me, there's, again, you can see the appeal and the value of something like that, right? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I was gonna say it seems like the only reason this is new content is because even though it's old content to other people, the idea of just having no mind, patience, like these things, they were kind of lost over time, or they weren't represented well enough at the start in Western culture.
Yeah, I both of those statements are accurate.
I got another good statement. Since this has been applied cross-culturally, and it's been found out of different cultures, not just shared but found,
right?
It just makes you think, well, great minds keep aspiring to these values, so they might be some of the more truer values, at least to live, that kind of life.
That's great insight.
That they were looking for. Right.
So then maybe then it could be a part of each and every one of us in the way that we live our lives. That it could, whether you can identify the concepts as we've expressed them, or they've been expressed by these different ideologies. That you're 100% correct in that. there's a recognition of what constitutes the highest quality of like state of mind and state of being, which is essentially what we're talking about here, right? State of mind, state of being. So that's what the way is. So when it's a fictitiously presented, that's what it's a reference to. It alludes to that your state of mind, body, and spirit they're present in everything that you do, and they manifest in everything that you do. And so then the decisions you make, the choices you make, and the actions you take can be a direct outcry of that, right? So that maybe then a code of behavior, or code of conduct, or a code of honor. Maybe that's something that we all might desperately need integrated into our lives, right? Okay, I want to. We're just gonna touch on the Bushido code. We're gonna quickly wrap up with this. So I would just the Bushido code it interprets how chivalrous men should act in their personal and professional lives. It is the emphasis of compassion, benevolence, and other non-martial qualities of manliness. Again, maybe something that people need to spend some time paying attention to. That here, you can use this not just to define yourself as a man. Because remember, samurai culture, there was equal representation. Women were present in samurai culture, right? And there's some examples of them that they were absolutely lethal. Now, having said that, but this idea that we can emphasize compassion and benevolence and how to behave like forthright, stoic individuals, so that you could sum them up in these 8 different codes, right? So the first one is rectitude or justice, and this is defined as one's power to decide upon a course of conduct in accordance with reason, without wavering, and to do what needs to be done. So once you've chosen that course of action, that you act unwaveringly in the pursuit of that action, and that it should always reflect what's a just behavior, and you, the individual, have to answer what would constitute a just form of behavior. Again, it's all dependent on the circumstances that you find yourself in.
That makes sense.
Okay, so
especially with all the
that's right. So that's right. So
it's becoming hard to add to it.
Right, but it's okay. The idea, we're just going to close out with this, and I think the idea is for us to have an awareness that, you know what, they're outside of everything and the troubles that we've been experiencing, especially socially, say in the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years, that there might be answers within our own history and ways to and ways to approach it. And you don't have to integrate these things as they are specifically, but we can borrow from these concepts and ideas, and they can inform everything that we do to a degree that now we reflect the highest expression of who we potentially could and can be. And I think there's value in that. I think we need to start looking towards here. Be honest with yourself. Do you think you're the highest expression of who you are? If the answer is no, that's the answer, right? So, and then maybe this line of thinking and reasoning can be informative then to sort of allow for you to be able to do that, to find the highest expression of your potential and who you are. Okay, so
yeah, I was gonna say, to whoever says yes, I'm perfect, what do you do now?
Yeah, where do you go from there?
I think you still get to practice these states of minds and qualities. It's just you have a higher appreciation for practicing it.
Right.
It seems like something you never stop once you start.
Right. So, and it's so great to hear you say that. I often cite that about anything, exercise, meditation, and martial arts, that once you start down that path, that way, once you start following the way, You can't deviate from the way. It's a lifetime now of pursuing the way, and you devote yourself to it, and you summon the mental discipline to stick with it, and it should evolve as you evolve. So like it shouldn't be stagnant. The practices should have room to grow, so that to reflect the growth of you, the individual. So again, once you start down that road, you should consider it a lifetime journey. That's the way. All right. Number 2 in the Budo code is courage. Bushido distinguishes between bravery and courage. Right? Courage is worthy of being counted among virtues only if it's exercised in the cause of righteousness or rectitude or justice, because it's just. Righteousness can often, sometimes I see that as people can behave righteously, and it can be lead to very poor behavior, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of justice, where and then you have the courage to stand up for what is right, I think that there's value in that. So Confucius used to say, perceiving what is right and doing it not reveals a lack of courage. In short, courage is doing what is right. That's what courage is. Bravery's you being, thoughtfully or recklessly confronting danger. That's what bravery is. But courage is the capacity to do what is right. And again, I think there's a lot of people now who don't think about doing what is right. They only think about what's doing right for them. Right? That's selfishness. And this type of courage is, in regards to the culture it comes out of, it's in service to others, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like feeling fear but going about it anyways.
Right, you do the right thing even though there's fear like that, you could be, there's consequences for having the courage to do the right thing, but then you still go, okay, that be damned, I'm going to do the right thing. Okay, number 3 is benevolence or mercy. So this idea that you act with affection for others. You have sympathy. You pity people. You understand mercy and the value of giving a shit, having compassion, right? So it goes hand in hand with justice and the courage to do what's right. It's to see those around you as of value.
Oh, I heard interesting distinction between sympathetic and empathetic. Empathy
is you feel for them.
Yeah, we're
sympathy is you having the capacity intellectually to understand what their plight, and understanding, isn't that one of the highest things that you seek, right?
Not just to relate and then identify with it. That's empathetic.
No, that's right.
And that can be destructive.
Right, but because you end up feeling it when you go, maybe feeling shouldn't be part of this, that you need to understand what they're going through. So, and now through that understanding, then you can pick a course of action that reflects the best solution to whatever you're confronted with.
Right, like if you're empathetic towards someone, you might not be helping them. They might be on a self-destructive path anyways. And you're just
going to contribute to it or amplify it, make it worse, right?
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Here's some money. I'm sure you'll do right with it.
And that's exactly spot on. Okay, so then we'll move on to number 4. And number 4, which is politeness, right? So it's what Confucius focused on, which was how to conduct yourself in the course of a complex society. And if you're going to live in a civilization, how do civilized people behave? Well, then politeness might be a way to go about doing it. Where here, politeness reflects that that it's acknowledgement of the value of the other person, because you recognize the value in them, therefore you're able to recognize the value of yourself. That's how you recognize your own value. You treat them with regard, and it demonstrates that you have high regard for yourself.
I could see that being like fairly simplistic if you think about roles and things, but wouldn't it get complicated when you start talking about the potential of like that individual?
I would agree. Look, I would agree. Politeness is a poor virtue if it's motivated by fear. You're polite because you're afraid of consequence, like physical, like
Yeah, I'm not gonna be nice to the cashier just because I don't want them to spin my food. I do it because I know what that job's like.
Right,
Like
right. So
I
it's
feel bad for them.
that's right. So you can relate. You apply understanding, and as a result of understanding, now it informs your behavior. So then you treat the person that you're dealing with dignity and respect. That's politeness.
To be fair, I'm being not sympathetic, empathetic. I give them bigger tips because I know that industry.
Okay, right. Okay, that's fair. All right. So I think that kind of sums up politeness, and then we'll do the next number 5 is honesty and sincerity. So true samurai disdained money, believing that men must grudge money for riches because it hinders wisdom. They begrudge money because there might be some value in it. I think the people who become affluent, they forget what it's like if they ever knew. Because what if they're born into money, right? So they don't understand what it's like to live without material advantage. So I think that. I think honesty and sincerity is a way that is a way for them to be able to relate to people better, right? And now in the case of the samurai, they encouraged thrift, not for economical reasons, but to exercise abstinence so that you can live without a cushy existence. You could, and you'd still live a fine life. And I think that they because they appreciated simplicity and they wanted sincerity, and maybe they found it difficult to be honest and sincere when the only thing you were concerned with is profit. So then maybe it's a reflection then on contemporary financial institutions and structures and the people within them that, they'll present like they're sincere and they're honest and they care, but do they really?
I was gonna say we have to look at identity and talk about like if we're diving into it more, you gotta look like nowadays. How do we look on paper, or was that now it's so much about identity. It's
right, and so then it's fictional. It's not genuine. It's not sincere. Which is, and what they value again, the code is that their sincerity, and they allude to the idea that you can't be sincere if your focus then is material gain and material riches, because that's predisposes you to being selfish. So then, out of selfishness, you'll present in the way that you want others to see you, not as maybe so much as like wealthy and stuff, but as being genuine and sincere and honest. But when their back's turned, you'll do dishonest things for personal gain. You'll justify it with just the way we do things, like it's just it's the way the game's played. This is how you do it, right? I'm not trying to be a bad guy, I just am, right? Like,
yeah, I hate to say it, but we're in a culture where it's like we sell everything from personality to time to like, I don't want to make a joke about like different types of drinks out on the market. It's like, oh, let's get this brand of drink. It's so good and new. It's ridiculous.
It is. So then maybe then an honest expression of sincerity, you can see where they would value that and treat that with high regard. So maybe that might be kind of lost on us today. It's not that we don't value it, but we certainly don't act in accordance to it. We just honor it in word, like we pay lip service to it, and then go, see, look, we want teamwork. We want you to feel like you belong. Just do as you're told.
Yeah, we have.
Way to go. That's a mixed message. That's confusing.
Yeah, at this company, we're like a family. Well, I've never seen a very functional family.
So I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Oh, like I said, if you ever find what normal is, tell me and we can put it in a zoo.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so number 6, we're gonna move on to number 6, and number 6 is honor. So it's tied to that non-material behavior, right? This idea of honor, the sense of honor, a vivid consciousness of personal dignity and worth. So it's dignity above all. So you can, where that has more meaning than a pocket full of gold. Okay, that you have that you conduct yourself in a dignified manner and with respect, right? And if you are impatient or short-tempered, that demonstrates no honor, no worthiness, right? Having honor requires you to be truly patient. It means, in some cases, it sometimes means bearing the unbearable, right?
Could you say it's almost like having a little bit of respect for the time and circumstance?
Maybe, but I think honor is it's more broad, that you conduct yourself in such a way that you're dignified, that you don't lash out at people, you don't no matter how difficult the situation is. It's composure, it's self-respect.
I have a rough idea. I still want to search it up afterwards.
Yeah, by all means, please do. We can discuss it. Keep discussing honor if you'd like, but being dishonorable in their eyes would be the equivalent of being dishonest, lying.
Dignity seems like it's a more personal thing. Not only is it how you represent.
Because honor is a personal thing. It's how you conduct yourself. So a dignified way of conducting yourself would be calm, intelligent, reasonable, rational. No emotional outbursts, no extremes in behavior, where you're calm, placid, sharp, alert, aware, relaxed.
It almost sounds like it contradicts itself, but it doesn't.
But it doesn't, because they move together actually really, really fluidly.
I was just wondering if there's like a difference between honor and dignity, because
I would almost equate them to being the same thing.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I don't use the word dignity that much, but in its place I've used honor.
You could simply say self-respect. What you could it would adequately serve in place of honor or dignity. It's self-respect, right? That you act out of self-respect. So if you're respectful of the self, you're not extreme in your behavior. You're not having temper tantrums, lashing out, being verbally abusive, even when you're confronting somebody. That it's an awkward, unpleasant conversation to have, but you're still able to have it where you're not reduced to slinging mud and throwing insults and that sort of thing. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I understand. I was hoping for a definition, but this totally works. This idea that you show respect for the person even though they're in that situation. It seems like they're against you.
Or even if they're disrespectful, they can be disrespectful, but because they're reduced to that stupidity, you don't reduce yourself to that. That's dignity. That's honor. That's self-respect. So it's a very pliable word, and it probably covers a lot in terms of, but it's always reflective of the behavior, and so so honor is more about not a non-reckless kind of behavior, where it's a behavior that reflects being present, dignity, self-respect, right? And then as an act of honor, instead of behaving, somebody can be dishonorable, but you maintain your level of honor without being diminished by their stupidity. right? And without being drawn into that stupidity, so that now you're doing the same thing that they are.
Yeah, it's only the ego that drags you back into that.
Right.
And this is supposed. I'm not saying the Bushido code itself, but like many different codes are trying to take you out of that self-centered frame of mind.
Right. So now you're only behaving in a way that's appropriate given whatever the circumstances are. So you can strip away all the names and the words, and it's basically having the good sense to choose the appropriate course of action given the circumstances you're confronted with and the details of those circumstances. And then maintaining composure where you don't lose your shit and you're flying, lashing out and stuff like that, which is so common now that it's just about expressing your dissatisfaction. Who gives a shit you're dissatisfied? Shut up. What are you gonna do about it? Like, because to them they think, well, I am doing something about it. I'm lashing out. I'm expressing my dissatisfaction. But that's not a resolution. It's not the appropriate course of action. That's just gratifying to yourself because now makes you feel good because you feel important or whatever like that, or you feel validated or acknowledged because you had a wild outburst. When in fact the only thing you end up looking like is like a fucking idiot.
It's even worse if you're attempting to piss other people off.
Right.
Like character attacks are like pretty low.
But it's funny because when people have a disagreement, that's typically what it gets reduced to. And you go like, when the most appropriate course of action would be here, how do we resolve this? How do we come to a conclusion that respectfully addresses both sides of this issue?
Yeah,
and then comes to like a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, you can't call them all these names and then say that. You could say, hey, I'm so pissed off, I want to do this, this, and this. But since I care about you, let's have
I don't. Right. So that would be honorable.
You probably shouldn't tell them that you want to kick their ass. I want to, but I won't.
Yeah.
Because that's antagonizing.
Yeah, absolutely it is, right? So and if you're maintaining composure, then you're not going out of your way to antagonize them. And then if it gets reduced, because very often if you're gonna assassinate someone's character to their face, there's a great potential for it to lead to physical violence. So someone who has honor or dignity and self-respect maintains their composure right up until that moment when it now becomes a physical course of action. And then guess what they do? They behave, even if it's violently, in the most appropriate way. Not excessive, not extreme. They just neutralize everything with the absolute appropriate amount of physical action. Right? So you can't even characterize what they're doing as being violent. That's what the other person's doing, is flagrantly whipping their arms around, right, swearing and frothing at the mouth, and
to hurt, not to neutralize.
Right. And then that person, all they do is they stop them dead in their tracks without causing serious damage. So you can't call that violent. The first person's outbursts were violent. That composed person just chose a course of action. That's it. What an ultimate expression of your potential.
That's the thing. You could say they chose a course of action, and of course everything's a choice, but you're not going to let someone just hit you. So it's like, okay, he defended himself. He actually acted optimally.
I don't even like to use that kind of language.
Defense.
Because defense. He just chose a course of action. So because here's the difference between attack and defense, right? There's no such thing. There is no such thing as attack or defense. There's only you either attacking or you're being attacked.
That's fair.
Okay.
Because you're not defending, you're getting out of the way.
So I think again, because we try to find a clever way to talk about things to make them more accessible or more pleasant. And I go, but you're talking about something that is inherently unpleasant. It's not nice. There's nothing nice about it. If you're reduced to now where like the best, most appropriate thing you could do is physically accost somebody, guess what? Everything fell apart. Everything failed. That represents absolute failure. But you're still stuck with the situation. And the situation is violent. You have to act. Right? That's it.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
It's kind of like you said before. Once you get to a certain place, you can't go, oh, how this happened, why this happened.
Yeah, it's
like
it's way too late for that.
Yeah, we're here now. Now what?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think that perfectly sums up honor, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get on to 7 real quick. So 7 is loyalty, and true men remain loyal to those to whom they are indebted. So if you feel like you owe somebody something, then then part of that code of honor, that chivalrous code, requires you then to be loyal. And I think there's real value in that, especially in a world like today where we spend a lot of time, people are just backstabbing each other, turn on each other at every opportunity. They're frenemies. Like, come on. Right? So loyalty means that by extension, that if you say you're walking and there's a circle on the ground around you, that those that you're loyal to are within that circle, and that when you act in accordance to those in that circle and to yourself. So not at the expense of yourself, but you honor yourself, you honor them, and you're loyal to them, and that you can be counted on and trusted. Right? That's what loyalty is. I think is a fair definition of loyalty, as the way that particularly in the Budo. But again, the samurai had no shortage of turning on each other and backstabbing, because guess what? There was a lot of samurai who, when it was convenient, they'd follow the code of the Bushido. Sorry, the Bushido. But when it was inconvenient, they just dispel it or dismiss it, which is what goes on currently today, right?
Oh, but we have different words to call it.
You can call it whatever you want, but ultimately that's what we're talking about. So and things like loyalty and friendship, I don't think they're supposed to be things of convenience. I think that sometimes you can equate them to struggle, and that because that sometimes it's a struggle to be loyal and to maintain friendships, but you also have to do it so that to a degree that you recognize that, like, it can't be at the expense of yourself, right? So it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah, it's weird because at some point you're a turncoat the other way. You're someone who is in a bad position, and even the person who you were loyal to could respect, the situation.
Right. So I think loyalty, again, is something that everyone can appreciate the value in, but I think very often, like so many of us, that it just becomes a thing of convenience, right? So, like friendship, and I go with true friendships is when you don't give up on each other, and again, it's only because both of you treat each other with the same kind of value. But if one of you is like disrespectful or talk behind the back of the other, or willfully and deceitfully do malicious things, they're not your friend. They're not loyal to you. They don't give a shit. All right, stay away from those people.
I was gonna bring in I forget who said it, but you can only know a person to a certain extent. Like, you can't live their life.
That's right.
So to be friends with somebody, it really is balancing.
Right, and there's an unwritten agreement there that you'll demonstrate mutual respect for. It's an unwritten kind of guideline that you have mutual respect for each other, so long as you respect each other. The moment one of you starts disrespecting the other, guess what? You just, whether intentional or not, you just absolve that friendship. It's just the only thing that could happen to is it disintegrates.
Yeah, usually it's a fast one, but be slow.
But it does happen. It happens, right? All right, so, and let's quickly move on to number 8. And number 8 is character and self-control. And the Bushido teaches that men should behave according to an absolute moral standard, one that transcends logic, that what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. To understand the difference between good and bad, a man should know the difference. The first objective of samurai education was to build up character. And part of that building of character is developing self-control, and how to conduct yourself, and how to conduct yourself as a person of character. right? And with self-control. So remember what we were talking about. We were just talking about it, that you're composed. You maintain self-control. You demonstrate good understanding, right? That's where your character comes from. And then it's all those other 7 Bushido qualities now manifest in character and self-control, right? So I think right. I think that kind of sums it up kind of effectively, right? It's when you're acting out of character and self-control, it's you choosing compassion over disregard. It's being able to confront without confrontation. It's acting out of benevolence instead of belligerence. You demonstrate these ageless qualities of what it means to be a samurai, or in their case, how they would characterize it. This is how a true man would behave, right? This is true manliness. That you're forthright. You stand your ground. You honor your word. You give a shit. You look after the person who's disadvantaged. You give of yourself freely, and with no expectation of return, and you conduct yourself nobly and with a strong sense of justice, right? I go, those are lessons they're timeless, and yet they're kind of lost on us today. We're struggling with that. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, it seems like with all the consumerism that's rampant, entertainment that's rampant, it's very easy
all this stuff gets lost.
Yeah, it's very easy to not find your own personal struggle, whereas this coda, it puts you directly in the line of conforming, but the way you conform grants you freedom.
Right.
It seems like ultimate freedom.
Right. So then it's just a guideline, and then you're the one who's supposed to manifest it. So it falls to you, because all these codes recognize the value in the person coming to the discovery themselves, and then them choosing to live the life in this capacity, in this way, right? But they do it as an active choice of doing it, not because you're forced to, and not because you were brought up this way.
It's incredible that it was encapsulated with just a few words from I think it was the Japanese system.
Yeah.
It's so funny. You could reduce it to small things like find yourself, get your shit together. But it's such a pervasive idea where you find more and more of it throughout the experience. So there's not enough words for it, and you don't even need words for it.
Well, because I think, and again, ultimately, maybe not so directly, it's really the revolution and the evolution of the individual and their consciousness and their thinking. I think that you could summarize it that way. And then it provides, here's the guideline. And then ask yourself honestly, are you living up to these different aspects? Are you cultivating these different capacities? If you're actively doing this, then even you can expect to fail, like to make mistakes. But even in the light of that, because you're making such profound activity, it'll produce greatness in you, the individual. I go, instead of being the screaming kid who wants more, who needs to be pacified. Here's your pacifier. All right, time check.
Time check, 4:55.
No. I mean, how long are we in?
2 hours, 17 minutes.
Okay, that's
a little bit.
Okay, that's a perfectly good time to stop. I really did enjoy this conversation. I find, like I said, and you can appreciate now, and I hope whoever's took the time to actually sit through the 2 hours, how important I see this idea of the way that you can inform your life by the way, and you adapt it to you, and then you can interpret it as freely as you choose. And that if you honor all of what it alludes to, then it produces in you this highest expression of you, the individual. Yes?
Yeah, I was thinking, if you look at morals, it's very interesting as a system, but then it becomes moral relativism, and at some point, it seems like it's an over intellectual way to look at just, how do you feel? What do you do? This is a very no.
Nonsense kind of.
Yeah.
Because because it asks you to cultivate things like understanding, to be understanding.
In the relativism, it's not in what's okay and what's not okay. It's what is your limit. That's where the relativism is.
Right, and I think that again there might be more value in exploring this idea of the way. I think it's more than just this cute little thing that we see in pop culture today. I think that there might be great value. Now, whether or not people actually adopt it or not, I don't care. It's my culture. It's my way. To me, it is the way. So, having said that, I think I'm going to close on that. Do you have any last things you'd like to say?
Oh, just after you read that.
Okay, so I would suggest that you question everything, including yourself. Seek balance, seek knowledge, seek understanding. Become a renegade individualist, humanist, critical objective thinker. Thank you for your time. Love you all. Thank you so much.
What is the way?